standing ovation for a Ukrainian veteran of the Second World War.
A standing ovation for a former Nazi commander in the Canadian Parliament
who fought for Ukrainian independence against the Russians during the Second World War.
From Israel to Russia, global criticism for Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Such a sloppy attitude towards memory, and memory must be preserved in relation to the Nazis. No matter how old they are, there is no statute of limitations for these crimes.
Already in the line of Indian fire over support to Khalistan terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
We have been sharing details of fugitives from justice who have run away, who are seeking safe havens in Canada and elsewhere, to come back to India and face justice and justice, whether it's economic fugitives or it's terrorists. I think that's the way rule of law works.
From Nijjar to Nazi, double trouble for Trudeau. Will Canada wake up and crack down on Khalistan terror? That's our top focus on India First. Canada's opposition Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre wants the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to apologize to the people of Canada for that standing ovation a Nazi war veteran got in the Canadian Parliament. Though the House Speaker has apologized, but Trudeau remains in the line of fire. Both Israel and Russia have hit out at this standing ovation. India is already angry with Trudeau for encouragement to Khalistani terrorists in Canada under his watch, on his watch. In fact, there is a pro-Khalistan rally right now, Death to India rally. How can something like this, where people are calling for Hindus to be sent out of Canada, be permitted? Some changes appear to be taking place. The poster painting a target on the backs of top Indian diplomats in Canada, those posters have been taken down, and there are reports of additional security on ground for the Indian mission. I'm Gaurav Sawant. We get you the latest. India Today has the biggest team of reporters on ground zero to get you more on the story. But first, as always, the headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's all-out attack on the Congress says the party has handed over reins to urban Naxals. The Prime Minister declares he's the only one who fulfills all guarantees. AIA-DMK exits the NDA ahead of 2024 elections, blames Tamil Nadu BJP Chief Annamalai for the breakdown. India Today accesses Khalistani terror backer Gurpatwant Singh Pannu's dossier. Documents reveal Pannu was engineering a plot to radicalize even Kashmiris. All his Chandigarh properties have now been seized by the NIA. Massive boost for the Indian Air Force. The C-295 transport aircraft inducted by Union Defence Minister Rajnath Singh. It will be used to paradrop troops and cargo. It's raining gold for India at the Asian Games. Women's cricket team and 10-meter air rifle trio of Rudraksh Patil, Aishwarya Tomar and Divyansh Panwar win gold. So the Khalistanis in Canada have called for an anti-India rally. They're blockading the Indian missions and the High Commission and the consulates in Vancouver, in Toronto and in Ottawa. Barricades have been erected. Police have been deployed around Indian missions in Canada. Toronto, Vancouver and Ottawa missions are seeing some additional police deployment. Police have been deployed as Khalistan backers hold a Death to India protest. Posters praising Khalistani terrorists have meanwhile been taken down in Surrey. Protesters told not to use loudspeakers for their hateful comments against India. But are these just half measures being taken very reluctantly under intense pressure? Because the Canadian government and Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister of Canada clearly in the line of global fire. No action has been taken yet against Khalistan's terror backer Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, who shocked the civilized world with his hateful Hindus leave Canada rant. How can that even be permitted in any country that claims to follow rule-based order and claims to be a liberal democracy? There is an atmosphere of anger, anguish and fear among at least a section of Hindus in Canada after Pannu's threat telling Hindus to leave Canada and the inaction of the Justin Trudeau government. I quickly want to cut across to India. Today's ace correspondent on Ground Zero, Anisha Mathur, joins us from Toronto. We also have Mihir Trivedi, who joins us from Vancouver. Anisha, I want to understand from you first, what's the current situation, especially after Pannu's death to India rally and telling Hindus to leave Canada? What's the situation on ground?
Well, Gaurav, I'm outside the Indian Consulate in Toronto, where a few Khalistan supporters are holding a protest. What is what is something that the Indian government should take very seriously, and the Canadian government should also take very seriously, is the fact that these people are, while holding up the Khalistani flags, sort of have thrown an Indian flag down on the ground. But it doesn't seem that the police here in Canada is going to take any action about the way these people are protesting. The barricading that has been put up around the consulate office, they've hung up their posters out on the barricades themselves. They're walking around with the Indian flag on the ground. Even despite this massive police presence, we're seeing presence of Metropolitan Police, the Federal RCP, the riot police, all sorts of police presence is here. But the way these people are protesting, it seems that they are trying to provoke a response from Indians, from people, from the Indian government. Very clearly, that is because of the way these people are holding their protest, and the call for call against Hindus in Canada that had gone out from Pannu, while it has been condemned by on social media by politicians in Canada, it is still being treated as a free speech issue. We saw Liberal MP Chandra Arya coming out on the media and saying that, well, this kind of a call should not have gone out. The Conservative leader of opposition has criticized this kind of a rant, saying that this kind of hate speech should not have been made, that everybody has the right to live in Canada peacefully. This is also something that the ministers in the Canadian government, in the Trudeau government, came out and said. But right now, as the protest is going on right in front of me, they have blocked off the main entrance to the building where the Indian Consulate office is. They've blocked off that main entrance with their posters. And but it is clear that the Canadian police officials who are very closely watching the situation, they're not doing anything to stop the protest itself. And that is something that the Indian government will be will probably be taking very seriously.
Stay with me for a moment, Anisha. I also want to bring in Mihir Trivedi, who joins us from Vancouver. Mihir, India was very concerned at the lack of security at the Indian missions in Canada and lack of security for our diplomats. Their names and their photographs, they were made public. Adequate security measures provided on ground now. What's the situation where you are?
Absolutely. As you can see, right behind me is the Indian Consulate in Vancouver, and the security has been beefed up. In fact, I could see police personnel right in the morning. In fact, as soon as dawn, they were present here, making sure they are, overseeing all the arrangements. In fact, if I could just show our viewers the kind of arrangements we see at this point, is that this is the entrance to the Indian Consulate, and there is a lot of presence of police inside. In fact, this entire street is completely covered by Canadian police that is making sure that this protest remains peaceful. Remember, this is a call, a protest which is supposed to be peaceful, but the Canadian police is taking no chances. Remember, this is the downtown area, a busy area, and there are a lot of big offices and big companies having several employees coming here. So they can't take chances, and also the security of the people working in the Indian consulate is their responsibility. There is a sense of message that has been coming out saying that we will disrupt the functioning of the Indian consulate today with this protest, and that is something the Canadian police will not let happen. In fact, Canada has, in a sense, tried to make certain moves to ensure that they try to make sure they save whatever is left between the relationship between India and Canada. They are making positive moves by pulling down the posters that were targeting Indian diplomats at the Sari Gurudwara where Nijjar was killed. Today's protest is important for them.
Just pulling down a couple of posters, I mean, that's too little, that's too late, considering that country has blood on its hands. The leadership has blood on their hands for the Kanishk bombing where more than 300 people were killed, and yet Khalistan terror continues to grow in Canada. I mean, it's a shame, Anisha, and you've been speaking to a large number of people of Indian origin, both the Sikhs and the Hindus and other Canadians there. What's the buzz on ground? Do they see the anguish in India at Canada's support to Khalistan terror and extremism and of course the criminal gangs there? Anisha, can you hear me? Okay, we do see...
I'm sorry, Gaurav, can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, you know, you've been speaking to a cross-section of people, Anisha. You know, you've been speaking to the Hindus, you've been speaking to the Sikhs, you've been speaking to Canadians. Do they realize the anger and anguish in India, given what's happening, the support to Khalistani terrorists, extremists and organized criminal gangs, or some would argue state support?
Well, Gaurav, to be very honest with you, this entire issue is being treated with a lot of cynicism and by the Indian diaspora here in Canada. We've been speaking to persons who are connected to the Hindu community leaders, to Sikh community leaders, to people. They have been saying that it seems that Justin Trudeau was trying to consolidate his popularity with with a particular vote base, which seems to have backfired on him. It is also something that has been a bone of contention and a question of concern for the Hindu community over the last year or two, as there have been cases of temple vandalization as well as intimidation. What I'm also picking up from analysts and journalists who work with the Indian community in the Indian diaspora here is that the Khalistanis seem to be a very aggressive, a very vocal group, but they are a minority. About 5 to 6% of the Sikhs population in Canada. Even in Brampton itself, what I'm hearing is that most people may not actually support them, but they are too intimidated to really oppose them at present. But of course, with the current standoff between India and Canada, the question now that is worrying the Indian diaspora here is what happens next. Will they be able to visit India freely? What will happen to their friends, relatives who want to come to Canada, who want to visit Canada? What happens to those who want to go back home to India? And that is a question that they're asking, that should the Canadian government not have taken all of that into account before making this kind of statements. But right now, Gaurav, I will once again repeat, I'm outside the Indian consulate, and if you can give me 20 more seconds to speak. I'm so, the posters that are being put up out here, praising Nijjar, calling him a shaheed, calling him a martyr, that is something that will have to be taken very seriously by India and by the Indian government, because it seems that this so-called very aggressive minority is being given space. Right now in front of me, a lot of the Canadian national media, international media is watching these protests, and they are talking to the people who are participating in these protests, and these people are very, very vocally anti-India. So what kind of messaging is going out in the international media here is something that the government of India needs to be concerned about as well. Back to you. Okay, keep tracking that story. Mihir and Anisha, I will come back to you for more on this. The messaging very clearly, and I'm sure they're able to, separate the wheat from the chaff. They will realize nothing justifies the bombing of Kanishk, that Air India aircraft, the attempt to bomb the other aircraft, the bomb that exploded at the Narita airport, and the fact that that mindset and that terrorism continues in Canada even today. But the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau remains in the eye of a storm, also because of the standing ovation in the Canadian Parliament to Yaroslav Hunka, a 98-year-old Ukrainian war veteran seen as part of Nazi Germany collaborator formation in the Second World War. Those forces stand accused of killing Jewish and Polish civilians in the Second World War, and there was anger and outrage in Israel, in Poland, and in Russia, with Justin Trudeau being accused of backing a Nazi war veteran. Though the House Speaker, Anthony Rota, apologized, Trudeau remains in the line of fire.
Zelensky's speech received at least a dozen standing ovations. There was also one for this man, a 98-year-old Ukrainian Canadian who fought for Ukrainian independence against the Russians during the Second World War.
Such a sloppy attitude towards memory, and memory must be preserved in relation to the Nazis. No matter how old they are, there is no statute of limitations for these crimes. We know that many Western countries, including Canada, have raised a young generation that does not know who fought whom and what happened during the Second World War. This is fraught with the fact that fascism will manifest itself here and there, and we now see how it is trying to find its feet in the center of Europe, in Ukraine.
So Justin Trudeau government in Canada may not act, but the Narendra Modi government in India has cracked the whip on Khalistanis. Their overseas citizens of India, OCI cards, they're being cancelled. Passports of Khalistanis involved in vandalizing the Indian missions, they will be cancelled. Now, the National Investigation Agency, it's actually released a list of 19 Khalistanis fugitive from law living abroad in countries like the United States, like the United Kingdom, Canada, Dubai, and some even in Pakistan. We get you more in this report.
A bogus, non-binding exercise aimed at diasporic Sikhs. A so-called Punjab referendum asking participants whether they want the Sikh majority Punjab in India to become a separate Khalistan. The man behind the sham project, Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, a lawyer of joint US and Canadian citizenship who seeks for justice communities proscribed by India. The 56-year-old supporter of Khalistan, born in village Khankot of Amritsar and now based in the United States. He was declared a terrorist by India in 2020. Pannu named in more than a dozen criminal cases, some of them linked to terror and other violent activities. The NIA has intensified its crackdown on Pannu. Over the weekend, 2 of his properties were confiscated in Amritsar and Chandigarh, and so was his agricultural land in his ancestral village of Khankot in Amritsar district. Slain Khalistani supporter and designated terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar was one of advocates of Pannu's sham Khalistan referendum in Canada. As per sources, overseas citizenship cards and passports of Khalistani supporters involved in vandalizing Indian consulates abroad will now be cancelled by India. Indian agencies sharing their details with airports to keep a tab on their movements. The NIA has also finalized a list of 19 Khalistani fugitives who are part of anti-India plots. Most of them living in the US, the UK, Canada, Dubai and Pakistan. The action comes amidst diplomatic escalation between India and Canada over Nijar's murder. With Shreya Chatterjee, Bureau Report, India Today.
All is not well for Justin Trudeau and it continues to go downhill. It's been a week of embarrassment for the Canadian Prime Minister, from his plummeting popularity ratings to the global image of Canada, and the fact that Canada is now being seen as a safe haven for terrorists and extremists and criminal gangs. The downfall actually began soon after Trudeau's explosive and false allegations of the potential link of Indian agents in the killing of a Khalistani terrorist, Nijar. Watch India Today get you more in this report.
It hasn't been a good week for the Canadian Prime Minister. It's been 6 days since he dropped the diplomatic equivalent of a nuclear bomb on India-Canada relations with this.
Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
Since then, it's been an uninterrupted downslide for Justin Trudeau. Politically ridiculed, diplomatically criticized, and isolated even by his closest friends. As we mark a week since Trudeau's quest to paint India the assassin of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Nijjar, let's see how it's going for the Canadian Prime Minister. For starters, India hit back instantly with a visa blockade, stunning Team Trudeau. Canada's conspicuous lack of reciprocal action not only showing weakness, but the country's helpless dependence on Indian labour and workers in Canadian industry. Second, Trudeau's attempts to rally the Five Eyes intelligence alliance, the world's so-called Anglosphere. But each of those major powers, the US, UK and Australia, provided only token words of support, nothing near the kind of backing Trudeau was hoping for. In this game of optics, it was clear Prime Minister Trudeau was all alone in his mission against India. The third big embarrassment for Trudeau, the claim from one of his own allies that his allegations against India are based on open source information available on the internet.
The only briefings that I've been able to receive from CSIS are what are called open information briefings, or open source briefings, which is information that's available to the public doing an internet search, which I find frustrating.
The fourth big blow to Trudeau were his plummeting popularity ratings, with his political opposition using the moment to mount a ferocious attack on him.
I think we need to see more facts. The Prime Minister hasn't provided any facts. He provided a statement, and I will just emphasize that he didn't tell me any more in private than he told Canadians in public, so we want to see more information.
Fifth, and probably most embarrassingly, Trudeau's closest government ally, the Khalistan sympathetic Jagmeet Singh, virtually threw the Canadian Prime Minister under the bus, putting out this tweet, where he cunningly fitted in a criticism of his close friend Trudeau in an unrelated issue, hoping to offset the heat on himself. Sixth, with the global glare now fixed on his accommodation of terrorists on his soil, a shamefaced Trudeau had to order the offensive posters to be pulled down from the Surrey Gurudwara, posters honouring terrorist Nijjar and calling for the killing of Indian diplomats. Seventh, with India stepping up the pressure and seizing Indian properties of 19 Khalistani terrorists, including several based in Canada, Trudeau will likely begin to face unbearable heat from the very section he's been trying to milk for politics. And finally, with a list of Canadian Khalistanis whose PIO and OCI green cards are all set to be cancelled, ending their chances of easy travel to India, Trudeau will face the music from extremists who took their India linkages for granted thus far. As you can see, it hasn't been Trudeau's week. Bureau Report, India Today.